Well, things getting back to normal after the lights went out in Washington, D.C. A loose plug power line, I should say, plunging Capitol Hill into darkness and forcing the White House to use a backup source. You were looking at the State Department there. There's Oprah Winfrey as well at a different event. Officials don't suspect foul play. But what if it was? And just how vulnerable is our nation's electricity grid? It's a question we're asking today to Colonel Cedric Leighton, a former officer with the National Security Agency and a cybersecurity expert. So, Colonel, let me just start with what happened yesterday and how exactly it's described. It's being described as the failure of a simple piece of transmission equipment that caused the lights to go out in virtually every important and crucial department of government. How is that possible that one simple failure can cause all of that?
Well, Jenna, in a word, I'd say poor planning. And what that shows is that these systems, these electrical systems that are supporting our key government institutions, are not built with redundancy in mind. So if you don't build a redundant power system, you are asking for trouble like this. This appears to have been a physical cause, so it's a bit different than what could happen, for example, in a cyber attack. But either way, you have to have redundant systems and you have to have backup systems that can be used in a very quick, efficient manner to preserve power and to make sure that everything keeps functioning.
Why don't we have that, especially in Washington, D.C.?
Well, that's the greatest question, because there has been so much planning and, there's so much that we know about what terrorists want to do that it's very key when you build up defenses that you think of these redundancies, especially in the things like the power grid, that need to be built up like this. And because of the failure to implement these kinds of systems, we have a real problem. And that's why, we spend a lot of money on stuff, but we don't spend it on the right stuff in this case.
Just so our viewers might be hearing a little interruption in your microphone, that is a different sort of electricity. If you have a BlackBerry, by the way, Colonel, if you could just move it to the side, because I think that's the reason why we're getting a little interruption on your microphone, and I want to make sure we can hear you clearly. The USA Today had this analysis that said that we have about every 4 days, part of the nation's power grid is struck by a cyber or physical attack once every 4 days. And I'm curious, for a simple failure like we had in Washington, D.C., how difficult is it to replicate that as something intentional, like a cyber attack?
Well, it's not very hard to replicate these kinds of issues, Jenna, because what you can do with a cyber attack is you can make it look as if it's something completely different. You can also combine a cyber attack with a physical attack. So if you're doing that, then it becomes a much more dangerous scenario where you could not only replicate a physical attack, but you could also make multiple attacks possible. So if you have multiple attacks, then it becomes a much more serious issue, and it would be very hard to respond to those. And that becomes the key area that the planners should focus on when it comes to not only our daily lives, but also continuity of government. And that's what this is all about.
We keep on hearing that infrastructure is a problem. We hear about it time and time again. In your opinion, is the greatest threat to our infrastructure something like a storm or something like we saw yesterday, where there are going to be explosions or malfunctions, or something more sinister? Is there a way to prioritize what's really threatening the grid that we all depend upon?
In my view, the more sinister scenarios are the ones that we need to protect against, because if you protect against the most sinister scenarios, you're going to have a much better time dealing with things like storms, with things that nature is going to send our way. So when you have a situation where you need to look at how you protect everything that you've got, you start with the worst case and then you work from there. So that's the kind of planning that needs to happen, and that's the kind of stuff that needs to be implemented in every single aspect of our electric grid, and also to preserve and protect not only the governmental institutions, but also key private sector institutions as well.
Just want to point out, Amsterdam also had a huge outage. We also had one in Ankara and Istanbul, and so there's a question about NATO countries being hit. I only have 20 seconds here, Colonel. Do you walk around with a flashlight? I mean, what do you do? Everyone depends on their phones, right, with the flashlight on your phone, but if the power goes out, you're really stuck.
you are stuck. And that's one of those things. I mean, flashlights are going to last as long as the battery lasts in them. And that's one of the key things. You've got to be prepared. Backup generators are one solution, but they have to work at the right time.
Right. And it's not like you test it all the time. Colonel, it's great to have you on the program. Look forward to having you back. It's an important story that we continue to watch, specifically on happening now. So we'll be talking to you soon enough, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
You bet, Jenna. My pleasure.
Some scary possibilities out there.